The call came on a Tuesday. I remember because I had just pulled a double shift at the clinic, and my feet hadn't stopped aching since 6 that morning, and I was standing in the kitchen eating cold leftover pasta, straight from the container, when my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. I should have let it go to voicemail. But something made me pick up. Some reflex I still can't explain. "Is this Callie?" A woman's voice. Older. Careful. "It is. This is Harriet Voss. I'm Theodore's mother." I set the fork down very slowly. The pasta slid off and landed on the counter, and I didn't move to clean it up. My husband's mother. The woman I had met exactly once at our courthouse wedding 3 years ago, who had looked at me like I was a stain on a white dress. A 26-year-old ER intake coordinator in a green wrap dress, marrying her son without a church, without a reception, without any of the things she had apparently planned for him since before he could walk. Theodore had told me she was difficult. He'd said it the way people say the weather is unpredictable. Technically true, but underselling the danger entirely. "How did you get this number?" I asked. "Theodore gave it to me," she said. "A long time ago. Before that." The one word carried the weight of a whole calendar of things I was still trying to stop thinking about. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Voss?" There was a pause. Long enough that I thought maybe the call had dropped. "I'd like to have lunch," she said, "if you're willing." I had married Theodore Voss on a Friday in March, in the Hennepin County Courthouse in Minneapolis, with my best friend Becca as witness and a clerk named Deb who smelled like lavender and kept smiling at us like we were the best part of her week. We had known each other for 11 months. We met at a fundraiser for the children's hospital where I worked. He was there with a colleague, tall and easy in the way of men who've never had to fight for a room's attention. And he'd walked up to me mid-sentence of a conversation I was trying to escape and handed me a glass of sparkling water and said, "You look like you need a rescue." I laughed. I shouldn't have, but I did. He was charming in that particular way that doesn't announce itself, the kind that reveals itself in small moments, the way he remembered exactly how I took my coffee, the way he always held the door 2 seconds longer than necessary so the person behind him didn't have to rush. He was a financial consultant at a private wealth management firm. He made good money. He wore it quietly, which I found more unnerving than the men who wore it loud. We fell into each other fast. Too fast, probably. But I was 25 and lonely in that specific way you get lonely when you're surrounded by people all day and none of them are yours. His family was old Minneapolis money. Not flashy, but dense. The kind of wealth that had calcified over generations into something that looked like principle. His father, Franklin Voss, had built a real estate and investment portfolio over 40 years that had made the family name synonymous in certain circles with a kind of quiet, ruthless competence. Theodore was the eldest son. There were expectations. He never talked about them directly, but I could feel the outline of them in everything he didn't say. I told him I wanted to be honest before we got married. I wasn't in it for the money. I had my own income, my own apartment, my own things, but I also wasn't going to pretend I didn't see what the name meant, what it carried. I thought honesty was the solid ground we were building on. I see now I was the only one building. The wedding was small because Theodore said he wanted something intimate. I understood later that intimate meant something he could undo quietly if he needed to. His mother didn't come. She sent a card. Inside it said, "Wishing you both well." Nothing else. We moved into a house in Edina. Technically part of a trust arrangement his father had set up years before. I paid my share of utilities and groceries. I kept my bank account separate. I had my own car, my own health insurance through the clinic. I was careful. I was always careful. I thought that was enough. 11 months after the wedding, I had a miscarriage. I was 8 weeks along. We hadn't told anyone yet. The pregnancy had been unplanned, but Theodore had seemed genuinely moved when I showed him the test. He'd sat down on the edge of the bathtub and held my hand and said, Okay, we do this." I had believed him. I had let myself believe him completely. The miscarriage happened on a Sunday morning. I started bleeding while I was making breakfast, and by the time we got to the ER, it was already over. The doctor was kind. Theodore sat in the chair next to the bed and held my hand and didn't say much, which I thought was grief. It wasn't grief. He drove me home, helped me to the bedroom, said he was going to go get me soup from the place I liked on France Avenue. He was gone 40 minutes, which was fine, and then another hour, which was not. I called him. No answer. I texted. Nothing. He came home at 11 that night. I was still in the same position I'd been in when he left, because moving felt like it required a decision I didn't have the resources to make. He stood in the doorway of the bedroom, and he looked at me, and his face had that particular arrangement of features I'd only seen a few times. When his father called, when something at work went sideways, a sort of deliberate flattening, like he was deciding how much to give away. "I've been thinking," he said. I waited. "I don't think I can do this." The soup was in a paper bag in his hand. Butternut squash, from the smell of it. My favorite. "Do what?" I said. And I knew. I already knew. This. Us. He set the bag on the dresser. He didn't bring it to me. "I've been unhappy for a while, Callie. I think you know that." I didn't know that. I had thought we were fine. I had thought fine was what we were. "You waited until today," I said. "I didn't plan. You waited until today I lost the baby to tell me you want to leave." He didn't answer that, which was its own kind of answer. He left 3 days later. Not dramatically. He was too controlled for drama. He packed 2 bags and said his lawyer would be in touch about the house. He said he was sorry. He said it like he was sorry about a scheduling conflict. I lay in that bed in that house that wasn't mine, and I stared at the ceiling and I thought, what do I do now? And then I thought, whatever I do, he doesn't get to benefit from it. The divorce took 4 months. I had a good lawyer, Becca's cousin, who specialized in matrimonial law and had a way of looking across the negotiating table that made men unconsciously straighten their ties. I got a reasonable settlement. Not generous, but fair. The kind of fair that comes from having kept your own records, your own accounts, your own paper trail. I moved into a 1-bedroom in Uptown. I went back to work. I kept my head down and I let myself be angry privately, in the shower, on runs along the river, in the small hours when the apartment felt too quiet. I did not contact anyone in Theodore's family. I had no reason to. And then 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I got a call from a headhunter about a position I hadn't applied for. It was a director of patient services role at a private specialty clinic on the east side, newer facility, significant funding, affiliated with a foundation I'd heard of in passing. The pay was nearly double what I was making. The interview process was rigorous, 3 rounds over 5 weeks. But I knew healthcare operations and I knew people, and apparently that combination was rare enough to matter. I took the job. I didn't know, at the time, who owned the foundation. I found out 3 months in when my new supervisor mentioned it in the meeting so casually I almost missed it. Voss Family Foundation. I sat very still in that meeting. I waited until it was over. Then I went to the bathroom and stood at the sink and looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. The foundation was Franklin Voss's, Theodore's father. Not Theodore's. Franklin had set it up 15 years ago, initially as a tax vehicle, then as something he apparently took seriously, funding medical research and community health initiatives across the metro. The clinic where I now worked was one of 6 he'd invested in. I hadn't sought it out. I want to be clear about that, because I know how it looks. I hadn't maneuvered my way there. I had taken the best job available to me, and it had led me, through channels I couldn't have predicted, into the orbit of a man whose son had left me alone in a bedroom with a bag of soup. I thought about quitting. For about 48 hours, I thought about it seriously. Then I thought, I am good at this job. I have done nothing wrong. I am not leaving. I met Franklin Voss for the first time at a donor dinner 8 months into the job. He was in his late 60s, compact and deliberate, with the kind of face that had probably been handsome and had aged into something more interesting. All edges and consideration. He was working the room with the economy of a man who'd done it 1,000 times and had stopped pretending to enjoy it. I was there representing the clinic's patient outcomes data, which we'd been asked to present to major donors in small group conversations. He sat down across from me at my table between sessions. He didn't introduce himself. He just picked up the one-page summary I prepared and read it. "These readmission numbers are yours," he said. "They are. How did you get them down 12 points in 8 months?" I told him. He listened the way very few people listen, completely, without preparing his next sentence while I was still talking. When I finished, he said, "Most people in your position would have led with the funding request." "I wasn't going to lead with the funding request," I said. "The data speaks for itself. If it doesn't convince you, I'm not going to." He looked at me for a moment. Then he almost smiled. "Franklin Voss," he said, and put out his hand. "I know who you are," I said. "Callie Marsh." Something moved across his face. Brief. Controlled. "I know who you are too," he said. We shook hands. Neither of us said anything else about it. He started requesting me specifically for donor meetings, then for strategy sessions. Then, 6 months later, he called me directly. Not through the clinic's administrative channels, but on my cell, and asked if I would be willing to consult on the operational structure of 2 new clinics he was planning to fund in St. Paul. I said yes. I said it the same way I say yes to anything I've thought through completely, without hesitation, because the hesitation happened privately, before the answer. I want to explain what it was between me and Franklin Voss, because I know how people read these stories, and I know what they assume. It was not romantic. It was never romantic. He was 38 years older than me, and he had been widowed 7 years before, and he wore his wife's absence the way certain men wear old injuries, with a kind of respect for what it had cost him. What it was something I don't have a cleaner word for than recognition. He was a man who had built things carefully and been disappointed by people who were supposed to continue them. I was a woman who had been precise and deliberate and had still been discarded. We understood each other in the way of people who have been underestimated by the same kind of person. He was not kind in the warm, immediate way. He was kind in the way that meant he paid attention, and when you needed something, he had already thought of it. He asked about my work. He asked about my opinion on things, policy, operations, ethics, and healthcare funding. He asked as if the answers mattered. I will tell you something true. No one had asked me what I thought in a long time. Not like that. His mother, Harriet, had noticed. That was why she'd called. That was what the lunch was about. We met at a restaurant in Wayzata, which is that particular kind of Minnesota lakeside town that makes money look like it isn't trying. She was already seated when I arrived, in a pale blue blazer, hair done, posture impeccable. She ordered the wale. I ordered the same. She talked about the weather for approximately 90 seconds, and then she looked at me and said, "My son talks about you." "Franklin?" I said. "Franklin." She set down her water glass. "He has not talked about anyone since Helen died." Helen was Franklin's wife, Theodore's mother. I held that information carefully. "Mrs. Voss," I said, "if you're concerned about the nature of I'm not concerned about the nature of anything," she said. "I'm telling you that my son is happy. He calls me on Sundays now. He didn't used to." She paused. I wanted to meet the reason. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. "Theodore told me you were cold," she said, calculating. "I know. He says a lot of things that aren't true." She picked up her fork. "I am aware of how he left you." The restaurant was quiet. A boat moved across the lake outside the window. I watched it until I could trust my voice. "I'm not trying to punish him," I said. "I want you to know that. Whatever is happening with Franklin, it has nothing to do with Theodore." "I believe you," she said. "That's why I called." She reached into her bag and set a small envelope on the table between us. I didn't touch it. "Franklin is restructuring the foundation's governance," she said. "He needs people he trusts in formal roles. I'm on the advisory board. I wanted to put your name forward, but I wanted to ask you first." I looked at the envelope, then at her. "Why?" I said. "Because you're good," she said in the matter-of-fact tone of someone who doesn't traffic in flattery. "And because Franklin needs someone who is good for reasons that have nothing to do with him." I took the advisory role. I want to be honest. I thought about it for 3 weeks before I said yes. I talked it through with Becca, who said, "You're not doing anything wrong." And then said it again when I didn't respond, and then said it a third time, slowly, until it landed. I wasn't. I had not sought Franklin out. I had not engineered proximity to his family. I had done my job, and my job had been good enough that a person of integrity noticed. That's the thing about building something real. You can't fake the numbers. Over the next year, I worked more closely with Franklin on the foundation's strategic direction. I helped restructure the grant review process, reduced administrative overhead by 30%, launched a partnership with 3 community health organizations that the foundation had never engaged with before. He gave me the authority to make decisions and the room to make them well. I was 31. It was the first time in my professional life that someone had given me both things at once. Theodore had heard, by then, that I was involved with his father's work. I knew he had heard because Becca's husband ran in overlapping social circles and occasionally reported back. Theodore had told people I had manipulated my way in, that I was after the family money, that he'd always known I was like that. I heard this, and I felt something cold move through me and then pass. I let it pass. Because here is what Theodore didn't know, what he couldn't have calculated from his particular vantage point. Franklin was changing his estate structure. Quietly, deliberately, the way he did everything. He was moving assets into the foundation's operating endowment, restructuring charitable trusts, adjusting the governance documents in ways that would redirect significant resources toward the clinic network over the next decade. Theodore's inheritance expectation, the thing he had apparently been quietly managing his entire life, the invisible architecture beneath all his choices, was being rerouted, not to me, to the work, to the things that mattered. I didn't suggest it. I didn't engineer it. I had one conversation with Franklin early on when he asked my opinion on impact-focused endowment structures, and I gave him an honest answer about long-term sustainability versus private inheritance, and he listened and said, "That's what I've been thinking." And then he made his own decisions. I just told the truth. I always told the truth. That was the thing Theodore never understood about me. He thought because I was strategic I was dishonest, because in his world those two things went together. In my world, they are opposites. He called me on a Wednesday evening in October, 2.5 years after he left. I was in my apartment, going over grant review notes, when my phone lit up with his name. I had never deleted his contact. I'm not sure why. Maybe because deleting it felt like a gesture, and I didn't have energy for gestures. I let it ring through. He called back. I let it ring again. He texted, "Can we talk? Just talk. Please." I put the phone face down on the table and finished what I was reading. Then I picked it up and typed, "You can say what you need to say by text." He called again. I answered. "Callie." His voice was different. Tighter. The ease was gone. "I've been trying to reach you for 2 weeks." "I know. I mean to talk to you about my father." "Okay," I said. "I know you've been. I know you work with him. I know you're on the foundation board now." A pause. "I don't know how that happened, but I need you to understand that the estate." "Theodore," I said. "The trust restructuring, what he's doing with the Theodore." Quieter this time. He stopped. "Your father is restructuring his estate to more effectively fund the charitable mission of the foundation he built," I said. "That is a legal, ethical, and frankly admirable decision. I had no part in initiating it. You had to have said something." I told him the truth about impact investing when he asked me. That's all. Silence. "You knew," he said. "You knew what it would mean." "I knew what I thought about endowment structure," I said. "I didn't know anything about your financial expectations. I don't think about your financial expectations." That was entirely true. I want that to be on record. "He's cutting me out, Callie." "He's not cutting you out," I said. "He's making choices about his own money. Those are different things. He stopped. Started again. "You're really not going to help me." "Help you with what?" I said. "Talk your father out of using his own money the way he wants to?" "No, I'm not going to do that." Another silence. Longer. "I'm sorry," he said. I'm sorry for how it happened, with us. I thought about the bedroom and Adina, the suit bag on the dresser, the 45 minutes alone before I understood he wasn't coming back. I know you are, I said. I thought maybe we can't, I said. I don't say that with any anger. I say it because it's true. You've been planning this whole. I have not been planning anything, I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. I went to work. I did my job well. I told the truth when people asked me questions. That's all I did. Whatever happened as a result of that is not a plan, it's just consequence. He didn't say anything for a long time. Take care of yourself, Theodore, I said, and I meant it. I really do mean that. I hung up. I sat for a few minutes in the quiet of my apartment. The evening was coming in through the west-facing windows, that particular Minneapolis fall light that turns everything copper and provisional. I thought about who I had been 3 years ago, in that bedroom, bleeding and alone, watching the door close. I had not known then that I was going to be okay. I hadn't been performing composure. I had genuinely not known. I was 28 and I had lost a pregnancy and a marriage in the same afternoon, and I lay in that bed for 3 days because I did not have the architecture to stand up. What I built after was not revenge. I want to be clear about that, for myself more than for anyone else. It was just my life. It was the life I would have built, regardless of Theodore, regardless of the boss name, regardless of any of it. I was good at my work. I cared about it. I told the truth. I treated people as if their time and intelligence mattered. That those qualities turned out to matter to Franklin Voss. That was not strategy. That was just what happens sometimes when you keep building something real and the right person happens to look. Franklin called the next morning. He'd heard from Theodore. He asked if I was all right. I'm fine, I said. He called me too, Franklin said. We had a long conversation. I know it's complicated, I said. He's your son. Whatever you need to do, what I need to do, Franklin said, is run a foundation that does what it's supposed to do, with people I trust in the room. A pause. I wanted to make sure he hadn't rattled you. He didn't, I said. I know, Franklin said. I just wanted to say it out loud. Harriet sends me a card every year on the anniversary of that first lunch. Not a birthday card, not a holiday card, just a note card with a line or two in her precise cursive handwriting. Last year's said, "You are doing important work. Keep doing it." I have it on my desk, next to a photo of Becca's kids and the data summary from the year the St. Paul Clinic reduced its uninsured patient readmissions to the lowest rate in the metro. Theodore is in Denver now. Becca's husband says he's doing fine, new job, new apartment, apparently seeing someone. I hope that's true. I genuinely hope he has figured out, in Denver, what he could not figure out here. I am 32 years old. I manage a portfolio of community health clinics that serve 40,000 patients a year. I sit on the board of a foundation with a $40 million endowment. I live alone and I like it. I run along the river in the mornings and I eat whatever I want for dinner, and I talk to Becca on the phone at least twice a week, and sometimes I sit in my west-facing apartment and watch the light change, and I feel, with a quietness that still surprises me, genuinely okay. I did not plan any of it. I only decided on the third day after he left that I was not going to be someone who waited for the story to happen to her. I was going to be the one telling it. I think about that soup bag a lot, not with anger anymore. More like you'd think about a detail in a dream that turned out to mean something you didn't catch at the time. Theodore set it on the dresser, not on the bed next to me. Not in my hands. On the dresser across the room, like an obligation he'd technically fulfilled, and then he told me he was leaving. And then he left. What I've come to understand, slowly, over the years since, is that the choices we make in the small moments, where we set the bag, whether we stay or go, whether we tell the truth or the convenient version of it, those choices accumulate. They compound. They build a kind of record that eventually becomes undeniable. Theodore's record said, "I leave when things get hard." Mine said something else. And the world, eventually, reads both. I didn't set out to prove anything. I want to be honest about that because I think there's a version of this story where I'm calculating every move, playing some long game with a clear destination. That's not what happened. What happened is that I made a decision in that bedroom after 3 days of not being able to stand that I was going to live the same way I always had, with integrity, with clarity, with my whole effort, regardless of whether anyone was watching or rewarding me for it. That decision didn't feel heroic. It felt like the only dignified option available. Integrity is quiet. That's the part nobody tells you. It doesn't announce itself. It just means you tell the truth when Franklin Voss asks you about endowment structures, even when you could soften the answer to make yourself more useful. It means you take the job you're qualified for and you do it well, not as a vehicle for something else, but because the work matters and you are capable of mattering to it. And the intelligence piece. I don't mean cleverness. I don't mean strategy in the way Theodore used the word, like an accusation. I mean the willingness to understand a situation clearly, without the fog of ego or wishful thinking. To see what's actually in front of you. Franklin saw clearly. Harriet saw clearly. Theodore saw what he wanted to see, which is its own kind of blindness, and it cost him. But none of it. None of the doors that opened, none of the trust that was extended, would have meant anything without the third thing, which is just the refusal to stop. I got up. Every day after he left, I got up. I went to work. I was good at it. I built something, not because I had a vision of where it would lead, but because building felt better than collapsing, and I had made a choice about who I was going to be in the aftermath of being left. I am 32 years old. The work is real. The foundation is real. My apartment with the west-facing light is real, and it is mine. Theodore called it calculating. I think what he meant was she didn't fall apart the way I expected her to. That scared him more than anything. He was right to be scared, not of me, of what it meant that I wasn't.